Oh, so welcome to our December 12th LibsWork meeting. We have a couple things happening today. Chris and Mark are going to be presenting the Center of the Spoke, positioning libraries as workforce development hubs. And I'll turn it over to them in a second. We also have Sarah from Bendable, who is going to be doing an activity after Chris and Mark present. Sarah, can you just give a quick overview of what to expect from that portion?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me. So I'm with Bendable Labs, and I'm working with Burning Glass Institute on a qualitative research project for Walmart.org. And we've developed a kind of model of a workforce library of the future. So we're trying to think about kind of imagining a future where a local community's workforce ecosystem is really centered around the library. And essentially we've got a feedback activity. So we just want to get some reactions from you all about things that we've got in this model that you like, or things that you feel won't work, or especially some advice from you on where to be cautious, and also if you've got some inspirational thoughts about, if I had a magic wand, I would make this thing happen. It's pretty quick, and if you can stick around and give us some feedback, it would be great. It's all a part of our kind of design research project with BGI and Walmart. Thanks.
Right, awesome. So we'll make sure Chris and Mark have plenty of time, but if you all can stay for that portion, that would be really beneficial, and sounds like it'll be really interesting. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to Chris and Mark, and before I forget, if you all don't mind introducing yourselves in the chat with your name, where you're from, and anything interesting that you want to share, either about what you're working on or your library, that'll allow us to get to know who's in the meeting today. And you guys should be able to share your screen, but I have your slides if you need me to jump in. So.
Let's make sure y'all are able to see this, hypothetically. Wait.
Yes.
Let me make sure that this actually looks right for you. All right. Does it
There
look
we
like
go.
the presentation's up for you?
Yes.
It does. Yeah.
All right. Well, so without further ado, I guess we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you all so much for joining us today for this presentation. We call this presentation the Center of the Spoke, positioning libraries as workforce development hubs. So before we jump into the meat of the presentation, I figure it's always helpful for us to introduce ourselves. My name is Chris Baker. I'm a public library consultant with the Library Services team at the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction, which is our state's education agency. And Mark?
Hi, everyone. I am Mark Yoakum. I am the workforce development consultant for the regional library, public library system, South Central Library System. Great to be here.
So what we're going to cover today, there's been some exciting and interesting workforce development initiatives that have been happening in Wisconsin for quite some time now, both when I was originally working at the local level as a public librarian, and Mark was working on a lot of statewide really cool stuff, and then as of recent, sort of what those initiatives have turned into as of 2023 and where we're headed. So we're going to be talking a little bit about that history and how we got to our group, the Library Workforce Connection, which we'll talk about in a little bit. We'll share some of the core resources, tools, and trainings that were a result of some of the work that had been done prior to our formation of 2023's Library Workforce Connection group. We're going to talk about I think the most important and most exciting part about this, which is the development of local partnerships, collaborations, and workshops, because that's really the core of what Mark and I are trying to do at this point with workforce development initiatives and social service initiatives. And then finally, we're going to round it out at the end with some other statewide opportunities and services that libraries are able to opt into when they have the opportunity to. And that way it's kind of a, on-demand situation when it works best for them. So I think before we get into the actual initiatives themselves, it's really helpful for those that might not be familiar with Wisconsin to talk about the kind of unique Wisconsin library ecosystem that we have. In Wisconsin, we have 15 different quasi-governmental library systems that cover different Wisconsin regions. You can see them pictured on the slide here. They each are their own agency, and they then in turn represent the 381 libraries that are all members of said 15 different systems throughout the state. Each system has its own HQ, and also has its own leadership, consultants, and other staff to support and help advise the member libraries in their area. And that's really crucial to highlight and lift up, I think, is that the library systems all have such unbelievably talented leaders and staff and consultants that makes our job from a state library agency so much easier when it comes to appropriating federal funding, when it comes to looking at statewide initiatives and efforts. There are just so many amazing, talented partners we have throughout the state that know their individual regions, their individual systems, their libraries that are a part of their regions better than any one person could from a statewide perspective. So that local and regional expertise is just really, really valuable for us. And so, yeah, like I said, we coordinate statewide library support, continuing education opportunities, deal with LSTA funding to navigate that with some of the system folks and more. Sounds like somebody might have their mic on. I just want to let you know that I'm hearing some feedback from somebody's mic. So if you can hear, you might want to double check that. But I'll go ahead and move on. And now Mark's going to take it over from here for a second.
All right. Thank you, Chris. As Chris mentioned, there are a lot of layers to our library ecosystem, and we all work together to provide services that libraries have been providing for years. Information services, computer resources, all of that stuff. Starting back in 2018, the state received an LSTA grant for the Libraries Activating Workforce Development Skills Project. The LODS project, as we've called it, and it's been around for the 4-year grant initiative period, is a series of continuing ed opportunities and partnerships that are providing services to our patrons and our library staff. And the partners of this project include the Wisconsin Department of Workforce Development, Wisconsin's 11 nonprofit workforce development boards, DPI, Chris's agency, and the Wisconsin Library Association. Next slide, please. And I'm going to talk more in depth about LODS in just a slide or two. But I wanted to mention what LODS became as it was a time-limited project. It did end in December of 2022. However, the core group of LODS participants, namely the Wisconsin Library System staff and DPI and Workforce Development staff remained together and formed the Library Workforce Connection. And it meets monthly discussing initiatives and speakers. And I've got to give major props to Chris for keeping it going and supplying us with some wonderful resources and support. Next slide, please. So the LODS project had several components to it. The continuing ed piece was the 4 training webinars, and it explored areas of what workforce development is, the different parts of workforce development in the state, unemployment insurance, and labor market information. It also produced the workforce resources inventory, which we'll show in a slide or so, and a complete marketing toolkit, which was really awesome to help spread the word, along with several newfound partnerships that are just building and strengthening as we speak. Next slide, please. So the workforce resources inventory that I had just mentioned and linked to the slide, which you'll receive the slides. I think you've already have received the slides, so you can go ahead and check it out. But I love this thing. It is the workforce resources inventory for libraries, and it allows libraries who may be new to workforce development or veterans in it to really look at their what they have to offer through this lens, and it can be really handy, especially for front desk workers or reference or workforce development librarians such as yourselves. And next slide, please. The marketing toolkit was developed in partnership with a marketing firm, and it mainly consists of well, actually, no, I'm sorry. It includes customized Canva products that are usable as is, but you can also adjust things there. It has its own website, and its target audience is directly to patrons or job seekers in the communities. There are two messages that library staff can integrate. One towards confident library users, which directs them to our statewide resource, and then one that is for folks who may not be so comfortable with technology to start at the library. Next slide, please. On the digital side of things, the marketing toolkit includes widgets, buttons, banner ads, social media examples, and all kinds of things to get a library started and not have to reinvent the wheel all the time. So this is an example of our widgets, buttons, and banners. And on the physical side of things, thank you, Chris, is the our physical materials. So we have an example of a poster on the right. Excuse me, a little left-right dyslexia there. On the left, you've got the posters. On the right, you've got the rack cards and bookmarks. So we have all of those things. And if there is, for folks who may not be super comfortable with marketing, marketing is definitely it can be a scary word, but oftentimes it's just communication to your folks. But there is a marketing guide that includes tips and best practices for social media, for submitting press releases, pitching news stories, all kinds of things for marketing the job services at the library. And next slide. And it also includes tips for working with the media. So like I mentioned, press release templates, media story pitches, and public service announcements, and including earned media, which I am still trying to wrap my brain around because that is not my area of expertise. However, it could really help to have those proactive communications. And if you want to go to the next slide, and I think that is Chris.
All right, my friends. So as Mark mentioned, those are a lot of the results that came out of that LAUD's Workforce Development, Department of Workforce Development and Department of Public Instruction partnership that had been occurring since about 2018 or so. And once we generated this new group, if you want to call it that, as of 2023, the Library Workforce Connection, this monthly ongoing work group that meets, we really tried to identify, all right, well, what do we want to do with this ongoing group now? We have this LAUDS project, we have these great resources that were produced as a part of it, but how do we make sure that those are really shared in libraries and really integrated into library programming and library services? So I'm going to talk a little bit about this group right here, POSC, the Portage Area Workforce and Service Connection, which is a really proud achievement for me in my career personally. Going back to the library ecosystem and there being these different 15 different systems throughout the state, right? Mark works for South Central Library System, which is one of those 15 different systems that resides around the Dane County, Madison area. If you're familiar with Wisconsin at all, that's kind of its main region, but it includes a lot of libraries. How many libraries are in SCLS now, Mark?
54 libraries, 65 buildings.
Yeah, so it's a big, big system, and they offer a ton of support to their member libraries through consulting expertise like Mark offers, and through technology support, et cetera, right? Well, I was working at the Portage Public Library, which was one of the libraries that's a part of South Central Library System. And there was a survey that the system itself had sent out at one point to all the member libraries in their system saying what can you use extra advisement or help with, right? And I responded to it and said, I think Portage, which is where the city that I worked in has it's a rural city that is outside of an urban metropolis. And so it brings with it a lot of challenges. There's a lot of unemployment there. There's a lot of poverty, substance use disorder, mental health issues. Because it's in a rural area that also has the Columbia County Correctional Institution, so we get a lot of inmates that come through. We've got a very popular couple of homeless shelters there, and so obviously it's amazing as a librarian to be able to serve populations like that and help with those challenges that those folks might face. But they do bring with it a lot of resource squeezes. How do you deal with all of this stuff, right? And so I responded to the survey that the library system sent out saying, Mark, you're a workforce development consultant. Mark is, in fact, the only workforce development consultant in the state of Wisconsin, specifically working with libraries and workforce development. And they're so generous in lending him out, in a matter of speaking, to the state to work with on statewide partnerships to borrow his expertise. And I had said to Mark, how do we do this? How do we like get folks together in this area, different agencies, different organizations, different institutions to tackle some of these workforce development and social service gaps? And so Mark and I worked together to essentially contact all of these different agencies in the area, get them together to meet in Columbia County, Wisconsin, this under-resourced rural county, and say, let's work together. Let's form sort of structured, ongoing communication plan so we can start building projects around workforce development and social services in the area, share our resources, eliminate redundancies, et cetera, right? So this was formed in 2020 by us as a response to ongoing needs. We began identifying relevant community organizations and partners, inviting them to meet. And I was the adult services librarian and technology coordinator of the Portage Public Library at the time. And what that resulted in was this ongoing monthly collaboration that essentially forms a referral network between these different unique providers that each have their different specialties and different focus in the space of workforce development and social service. And I'm proud to say that even 3 years later, even though I've moved on to work for the state and Mark has other statewide projects he's working on, the group still continues to meet monthly, communicate regularly, refer users that come into their spaces together to other folks in POSC. And the biggest thing is it allows really quick, efficient, warm handoffs between partnering agencies. So that way you don't run into that no issue where a patron who's already struggling, who's already really working hard for meaningful employment or social services keeps getting told no, and that can have a real chilling effect. It can be really feel like you're beaten down when you're experiencing that. And this was a way to really circumvent that. So the main organizations that make up POSC are the Portage Public Library that I worked at, that serves as a major technology hub and sort of service connector for that, the aforementioned center of the spoke, as it were, the Riverhaven Homeless Shelter, who we work very closely with. I say we still because I worked there for so long, sorry, but that they work very closely with, that of course refers a lot of their clients and users to Columbia County Health and Human Services and the Wisconsin Department of Health Services, WorkSmart Network, which is a grant-funded workforce development support agency, and the Forward Service Corporation that serves a similar purpose. So one of the biggest things that we had to identify first was like, all right, so we're going to be this group that meets monthly, we all have different specialties. We all have different expectations from our stakeholders, from our budgeting agencies about what we complete and what we do. So how do we combine all of that into a cohesive mission and vision that we can communicate to the public so they understand what we're about and why we have these different organizations partnering together? And I'm proud to say that after a lot of wordsmithing that we all had to sit in the meetings and go back and forth on how we wanted to exactly frame this, we came up with our mission was to foster communication, collaboration, and growth between partner agencies in order to offer the most direct and accommodating services to Columbia County residents. And our long-term vision for the group was to strengthen our communities by becoming the first point of contact for those seeking assistance so that we may get everyone the help that they require as quickly and as efficiently as possible. And anybody is welcome to use any of that language if you want for anything that you're doing in your respective areas. So, Mark, this is back to you now here.
Sure. Great. Yes, and it's a fantastic group of people to work with. I was so happy to help and work with Chris to form this, and I'm again just so happy to see that it continues to help their community. So as Chris had mentioned, the reason behind POSC really is to make things easier for patrons and agencies and clients to all get the services that are necessary for people. And it does this by creating those connections between service agencies who wouldn't necessarily talk to each other very often, or agencies that do work often in tandem with each other to provide whole service to their clients. And it is also meant to highlight some of the emergent workforce development and social services resources and opportunities. So they feature a monthly speaker to help educate themselves on the workforce resources out there and agencies that are out there. And then it also is meant to avoid duplicating services where if an agency is providing the same service and they know each other, at least they can create some efficiencies there. And really, um, one of the biggest benefits is reducing the headache and ping pong of clients and patrons. I'll give you an example of this ping pong. Sorry, I'm doing it too, Chris. The homeless shelter participant in the organization, one of their criteria for assistance is that people sign up for services and social service agency type work. And frequently they would have clients who unfortunately had limited digital literacy. And so what they would end up doing is sending their clients over to the library so that the libraries can provide library staff like Chris when he was there at the time, and other library assistants um, to provide that digital literacy um, component or assistance. And then they would end up sending people back who needed assistance back to, once they identified the assistance that was needed, back to the homeless shelter. And it was just creating all kinds of right hand not knowing the left hand is doing kind of work. And it also helped the agencies, all of them, consolidate resources so that they can share multiple local organizations and create an easy access resource locator. And with that, next slide. So here is an example of one of our major initiatives when Chris and I were still there, and it's still going on. The POSC service flow chart. So we really developed this as kind of a behind the desk or near the reference desk resource for folks. So for example, they might use it for a job seeker might come to the library and say, hey, I need childcare. And from there, the person assisting the job seeker could refer them over to the Columbia County Health and Human Services and provide them with the information to Capital Consortium, one of the CAP agencies that serves the area. And this is really something that is just so easy to go through. It's color coded by agency, and it was just really meant to cross-reference a lot of these resources. Next slide, please. So one of the wants and needs actually of the partner agencies and the library itself is to see how it was doing. And from here, tracking became important, especially for finding out what is the impact of POSC and the referral network. And so here we have an example of our referral sheet. This is an example for January. So as you can see, Forward Services referred someone over to Riverhaven, and that was able to be tracked. And so we can kind of find and tweak the successes of POSC. And with that, next slide, and that's you, Chris.
Yeah, so just to refresh folks on the timeline, that essentially Mark and I were working together on POSC before I joined the state agency, and then before we create our library workforce connection group. So in consideration of that, like I mentioned, we were saying, all right, well, now what do we do with this group? What are some of these initiatives? And Mark and I thought about POSC and the success that was. And I think any of us who work on a statewide level or a large, wide regional level with workforce development, there's kind of two different approaches to how we might move the needle towards alleviating some of the pressure that comes with workforce development challenges and social service needs. It's either kind of a macro, high level approach of how do we do things from the top down and disseminate down to hope that we will effectuate change on the local level that way, or how do you kind of build grassroots efforts on a lot of different areas and hope that it kind of builds its way up to an ecosystem at the top that can be kind of coordinated at that point. And Mark and I really saw the value in POSC and how it benefited things on a local level. But obviously, that's just one library, that's just one region. And the reality is, we know that librarians are very busy. They have they're at capacity. They're doing so many different things for their community, programming, technology assistance, whatever. And so Mark and I and a couple of other partners that we have with the Department of Public Instruction decided, let's take a look at just offering some workforce development collaboration workshops in different regions throughout the state to show them kind of what we did with POSC, to talk and remind folks about what some of the resources that were an outcome of the LODS project are, how they can partner with other agencies or institutions in their area, and how do we bring some of those workforce development specialists from those areas into those workshops so we're just getting people talking at the same table, right? That's a huge part of it, is introducing folks and saying, oh, you didn't know that this was here? They didn't know that you were here. Now we've engaged that type of conversation and we can go from there. So we really focused in 2023 on cultivating additional library-centered community partnerships through specific in-person workshops. So far in 2023, we offered 2 different workshops, one in central Wisconsin, actually at the Portage Public Library. It just seemed like a good fit given what we'd worked on there. And then one way up north in northern Wisconsin, which is a region that is very vast, has a lot of space in between libraries and communities. And because it is quite far away from Milwaukee and Madison, Wisconsin, which are 2 of our urban metropolis, of course, they don't necessarily have all the resources available to them that some of those systems closer to some of those urban metropolises have. So there's a real need to make sure that we focus on northern Wisconsin as much as any other part of the state, right? And in 2024, we're also going to start to plan, or we're going to be planning a couple more additional workshops, at least 2, I believe, trying to hit the northeastern part of the state as well as the southwestern part of the state, possibly also the northwestern part of the state. And we're going to begin to survey the participants of these workshops to check in with them and see what they have accomplished. So really excited to see how that goes in 2024. So as I mentioned, our first workshop that we offered in 2023 was at the Portage Public Library. There's my, in a manner of speaking, alma mater of librarianship that I worked at prior. And the second one that we did, as mentioned, was in northern Wisconsin, specifically at the Sherman and Ruth Weiss Community Library in Hayward, Wisconsin. Beautiful, beautiful library space. And we brought, like I said, we invited partners into both of these workshops that were both relevant to the region as well as sort of statewide opportunities that were participants, which consisted of, and I should mention that the workshop, who is the intended audience? The intended audience for these workshops are workforce development regional specialists and librarians in these areas. So these aren't job fairs. These aren't intended for patrons to come in and apply for jobs. This is really a continuing education, professional development, networking, and collaboration building for library staff. So we offered the all-day workshops, which included lunch. There was lots of facilitated discussion throughout both of the workshops, a lot of different opportunities for attendees to learn about different resources, collaborations, and partner models, and presentations that would spark networking and brainstorming opportunities. So you can see here, there's a list of a bunch of different organizations. WISC Caregiver Careers helps get folks that are interested in in a CNA career be connected with different institutions so they can start getting training paid for and get employment as a CNA. POSC, our group, South Central Library System, which Mark is a part of, myself with DPI, the Wisconsin State SHRM, which is the Society for Human Resource Management, volunteers that want to help with workforce capital building issues throughout the state, Northwest Wisconsin Workforce Investment Board, who does a ton of amazing stuff up northern Wisconsin, and Employ Milwaukee, one of our close partners, her name's Millie Kobe, that does excellent work around the Milwaukee area and was recently highlighted on the news for her amazing work. So one of the things that we did in terms of trying to make sure that we got folks talking was we had a networking activity that this might seem kind of like silly or mundane or juvenile, but it's kind of amazing when you give people simple props, what they can come up with. That we just separated people into 4 different groups, and we had these big Post-it note sheets we put on the different tables, and we would give people smaller Post-it notes and say, all right, you're group 1, group 2, group 3, group 4, spend 10 minutes filling out that aforementioned workforce development inventory that was a part of the LODS project, so they could kind of get an idea of where they were at, what gaps in workforce development or social services do they currently have, what are they doing pretty well. Then using those sticky notes, pop them onto the larger sticky note to decide what are some problems that all of us as a group consisting of different people from different parts of this region, different specialties, what are some problems we know we're having in our area? What are some challenges, whether it's substance use disorder, whether it's a lack of transportation, no affordable housing, you name it, poor communication between partner agencies, all these things that we know make up a lot of the challenges with workforce development and social services. And then we just had those groups rotate to another person's big Post-it note, another group's big Post-it note with Post-its on it, and have them try to ideate on solutions to another group's problems that they created. And in doing so afterwards, we'd get people together and then do facilitated discussion. And it was incredible how there were solutions that were brought up, resources that Mark and I weren't even aware of, that different parts of the region, different specialists would go, well, this will solve that problem, and people writing notes down. And so it's a really great example, I think, of how even just a little bit of workshopping and communication can result in some great spark ideas, which ultimately will hopefully lead to better workforce development initiatives in folks' libraries. So just to show you kind of, these are some great pictures of some of the work that we did in the workshop that was at the Portage Library. You can see Mark presenting there. We have a lot of different librarians together. You can see how the Post-it note activity went. Really successful, and everybody said they really enjoyed it. And similarly, then these are photos from there we go. Photos from the Hayward Workforce Development Workshop that we did in northern Wisconsin. Different presenters that we brought in, the same Post-it note activity that was very successful again. And you'll see the gentleman that's in the center of the photo up at the top. That's actually our Assistant State Superintendent for the Division of Libraries and Technology. It was really gracious that he decided to travel all the way up north to visit the meeting and say hello to folks, which was just really cool. So, all right, Mark, take it away, my friend.
All right, a theme that I'm sure that everyone's noticed is that partnerships are essential for all our workforce development services that our libraries are providing. One of the outcomes of LODS was the creation of the Library Mentor Network. It had 3 aims: create relationships between libraries and workforce development boards and entities, enable collaboration between libraries and workforce development, and then support and enable outreach of workforce services in libraries. So how did it do this? Next slide, please. It started off with 12 trainings to over 200 library staff participants, and the curation of workforce assistance resources, which were built by both library staff and workforce staff, along with a ton of relationship building, including things like quarterly meetings, monthly meetings through the library workforce connection, and just a bundle of getting together. And the strong ongoing partnerships that took off, including POSC and the Library Workforce Connection, really helped make this work easier. It made it a lot less, I guess, just a lot less awkward for libraries to reach out to workforce agencies. And it also created helped promote a job center presence at the library. Next slide, please. So continuing the work, these examples come from one of our wonderful presentation partners, Millie Kobe, with the Employee Milwaukee Workforce Board. They are continuing to work with their local libraries by offering technology literacy classes that provide equipment such as computers and training through the library to participants. They have programs that are meant for certain age groups, including Summer Earn to Learn for youth to meet libraries and workforce development staff. A whole bunch of area and local employer outreach in libraries, such as hiring events and job fairs and resource fairs. And the Wisherm volunteers, which I'll talk a little bit more in depth in the next slide. With that, please. Yeah, thank you, Chris. Who is Wisherm? Wisherm is the Wisconsin state chapter for the Society for Human Resource Managers. We worked with them by pairing some of their volunteers with libraries to provide one-on-one workforce development assistance to patrons themselves. So when library staff were feeling a bit stretched, this was a great way to meet that need on a one-to-one basis, with the goal of being a collaborative partner and a highly recognized HR resource from the SHRM folks. And they are committed to volunteer sustainability and then enhancing communication strategy, ensuring strong partnerships, and then also growing their members by attracting more HR professionals. They have 19 chapters within the state, over 3,700 members in their areas, and they include HR leadership, HR generalists, HR specialists, HR vendors and services, and also members that come from small and large organizations. Next slide. I mentioned this earlier, however, I'll go in depth here. So what can the Wisherm HR professionals do? They have knowledge of job search websites, including the ones listed here. They have education on job search skills, resume and cover letter writing and review. I love this piece because oftentimes HR is the first batch of folks who will see a resume and cover letter. Why not get help from an HR professional? They can also provide some interviewing skills and assistance, career development, networking opportunity, and then presentations in libraries on key topics. The next slide, please. So the entire intention with the Library Workforce Connection and the Wisconsin SHRM partnership is to build more connections between with SHRM librarians, library systems, the state, and other service specialists. And our hope is that this would create partnerships between the Library Workforce Connection and WISHRM and offer more future public-facing programs and initiatives. And next slide. Along with the WISHRM, it's kind of like but wait, there's more. We've also been providing statewide webinars to library staff, two that I'm very proud to have been part of. Were included one recently. There's an app for that, Wisconsin Social Service apps. So it provided information to library staff about the various social safety net programs. So in Wisconsin, we are lucky enough to have one single portal that you can register for Medicaid, childcare, and healthcare assistance. We also covered 211 from the United Way, great resources if you're not familiar with it, and also Lift Wisconsin that can help decrease the barrier that folks leaving incarceration can encounter when they reenter communities. That takes me right into the next one, reentry resources and programs for your community. This one, we featured a lot of state agencies and nonprofits that are engaged in helping the re-entering populations of the state, along with information and all kinds of resources. And you can check out the recording and slides to both of these. Next slide.
Just want to shout out too. That's with SUI, right, Mark? That was
Oh,
in
yes,
partnership.
yes.
That's our Southeastern Wisconsin Technology and Continuing Education Consortium of different systems. And Mark partners with some of their amazing people a lot. They're awesome. So
Absolutely. In Wisconsin, we definitely think across borders. We definitely don't put ourselves in silos. There's a lot of collaboration that happens here. Thank you, Chris.
yeah, no doubt. And speaking of, one of the current things that I'm working on is our Department of Public Instruction has been awarding a grant to Microsoft since about, I think, 2016, 2017, which is to cover the costs of really valuable certifications, Microsoft-based certifications that can be extremely expensive for the average user to try to get themselves. It used to be called the Imagine Academy through Microsoft. Now it's called Microsoft Learn. But essentially, what we're working on right now is working with the system consultants, just as I'd mentioned, to identify 15 different pilot libraries throughout the state of Wisconsin that'll cover diverse and broad geographic regions that already have the capacity, library staff, technology availability, et cetera, and interest to get themselves up as Microsoft certification or credentialing hubs, as it were, where they can proctor both virtually and in person Microsoft certifications for everything from .NET to Azure to Microsoft Office suites, Excel, Microsoft Defender, you kind of name it. Very high, very, very valuable, prioritized certifications through Microsoft that folks can put that badge on their LinkedIn if they go through these process that says, I am certified in Microsoft Excel, and positions them for really high paying, wonderful, fulfilling, meaningful jobs in the tech sector. And essentially the grant that DPI is awarding covers the costs of those expensive certifications. And so the hope is to get as many people as we can throughout the state of Wisconsin utilizing these different hubs that we're setting up to go through the credentialing process, get certified and get working and be really satisfied with that type of service that they are able to get at the library. The training is user driven from a public side of things, so the user can do it at home. can contact their local library, go through a virtual proctoring, and get certified. I believe at the last LibsWork meeting, we heard that Washington State is already doing something like this. Washington State, somebody else that we know and have some cool relationships with, awesome partnership with already. Kudos to them on that. And I'm hoping that we have a lot of success with it as well. So really looking forward to how this will pan out. So just for posterity's sake, here's a little resource roundup of some of the different links that are valuable for what we talked about today. Job Center Wisconsin's kind of the main workforce development hub through the state, through the Department of Workforce Development that folks in the state can utilize, and you kind of see the rest there. So you can let us know if you have any questions or if you want to poke around in some of our links in the future and look for clarification. But yeah, I'm Chris Baker, Public Library Consultant with DPI Library Services Team. Mark?
I'm Mark Yoakum, Workforce Development Consultant with the South Central Library System. Thank you all so much for letting us share all the awesome things we've got going on in Wisconsin.
Yeah, thanks, my friends.
Thank you so much. It is amazing the work that you are doing, and thank you for being so generous with sharing resources so that we can follow up and learn more and see what we can use in our own libraries. Anyone is welcome to unmute themselves or type questions into the chat. You can also use the hand raise option if you'd like to, if you feel like you want to be more orderly. But Mark and Chris are available to answer your questions or share more based on what you'd like to hear about.
Yep, you can always feel to drop us a line. I'll pop my email in chat.
Elizabeth, you unmuted yourself. Do you have something?
Yeah, sorry, I don't use Zoom very much anymore, and I can never figure out how to do the hand raise. I would be really intrigued to learn more about your partnership with SHRM. I went to a presentation at a Washington Workforce Conference recently, and I have been trying to get involved with them pre-COVID at the state level, and I'm just really interested in how you were able to harness the power of that for so many things.
Yeah, the thing I'll start off with too, and I'm not sure exactly what their organizational structure might look like you said in Washington State, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, Washington State, I gave you a little shout out too because we love you guys.
Yep.
You guys rock.
But I have to say though, one thing that I found hilarious is that you're giving a grant to Microsoft.
I know.
We thought the same thing. Buying stuff from them. Why you?
No kidding, but that's the weird thing is like, and this was before my time even joining the state agency, but usually it's the other way around, right? But it's this weird. Yes, I know.
Paying them for that stuff. Anywho,
totally,
yeah, tell me about
totally.
SHRM. Sorry.
No worries. And so at least when it comes to Wisconsin, there is a specific position. There's a workforce readiness director for the state, and that was the person that we connected with. There was a prior person in that position. He ended up moving on, and now we've been working with her name's Kelly Dunn Pogeman, and she's really involved in the national level too. But that's the person who we work with to really help us organize a lot of the communications with all the chapters throughout the state.
And it's workforce readiness director?
That's what her title is. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What was her name again?
Her name's Kelly.
I am not
Dunn.
above like reaching out to her and being
totally.
Like, how do I do this in Washington? I want to say, Washington, look what Wisconsin's doing. We got to do that.
Totally. And
in Seattle.
In fact, if you want to shoot me an email, I can even just do a warm handoff and just be like, hey, meet this person. And yeah, no problem. Here's her. I'll also see if I'll pop her page from the WSHRM into the chat so that you can actually see kind of her info there.
Cool, thanks.
No problem.
Yeah, I just looked up that position in the New Jersey chapter, and it's vacant.
Dang it.
Keep looking and seeing if that gets updated. Any other questions? You can unmute yourself, type in chat. Stunned silence.
That's what it is.
There we go.
Well, thank you all so much.
Yes.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for sharing your contact information. And I'll make sure that that goes out to the list as well for anyone who wants to write later or is watching the recording. So without further ado, Sarah, I'll turn it over to you. Is it okay to continue recording?
Yes, please. That would be really great,
All right,
actually.
great.
And I know people may have times that they need to drop off early. If anybody gets to see a little bit of this and is interested in giving us feedback, and they're not able to stay, please reach out to me. Totally happy to do other feedback sessions. I just dropped into the chat access to a Miro board where we're going to be gathering your feedback, and I'm gonna present to you very quickly what we're going to walk through, and then I will share my screen with my Miro board and kind of walk us through the feedback activity. So just let's first do our seeing if screen sharing is working in all the ways we want it to. So there we are. Are you guys seeing that first slide? Okay.
Yes. Looks
Okay.
good.
Great. And hold on one sec. Oh, sorry about that. Okay, we're gonna hold that just for a second. Okay, so what we're doing with this idea of the workforce library of the future is we're designing for a space that we know for many people in your communities is the intersection of the last mile of equitable broadband access and the first mile of workforce development. So we're really thinking about that entry-level job seeker who's walking into the library for support, and understanding that there are other foundational skill development supports that are needed. And what we're trying to do in this case is really put ourselves in the space of designing for the future so that we are giving ourselves permission to imagine, to say essentially, imagine if. And that's kind of the headspace that I hope you guys will all stay in through this activity. The model that we're going to walk through is not meant to be fully baked. And as you'll see in the Miro board, features of different parts of the model are highlighted on that board. And that's so that we can kind of gather your reactions. We really do want to hear about things that you see that you love or are inspired by, especially if that thing aligns with successful efforts that you already have underway. We want to hear about things that you think won't work, and we want some advice from you on how we might make some of these ideas actually become a reality. Okay, so the user journeys here are for the librarian and the job seeker. I just wanted to, coming off of that great presentation that we just had, want to make sure that it's clear that we are also talking with job seekers, we're talking with community organizations and training organizations, and also hiring managers. Actually, SHRM is fielding a survey for us, which is great. So let's go back to this, and here we go. Awesome. Okay, so librarian and job seeker user journeys. Again, a user journey is just an easy way to get your reactions to a model and at this stage of design. We have just 4 easy steps here. We're thinking about the onboarding process to a new system and ecosystem, the actual act of training and professional development. Then we move into this phase that we're calling signaling. And then a very important last phase of this overall system, which is the warm handoff or the referral out of the library. So in this kind of ecosystem model, we think of onboarding for the librarian as the moment where you are referring those who need foundational skill development, like digital literacy, numeracy and English language learning, to library programs that you already have going, and the offerings from community partners that you already have partnerships with. And then others can be introduced and onboarded to what we're going to call from now on the Job Readiness LER program. So we're thinking about how learning and employment records fit into this whole system. For the job seeker, they've come to the public library for job seeking or workforce development support. They've been welcomed in by the librarian, and if it's right for them, they're attending an information session to learn about the LER job readiness program. They sign up for the program, and the first thing you do is activate a digital wallet. So this is in concert with getting an e-library card, and it will this digital wallet will eventually house earned credentials and show skills that they have acquired. But right now, it's an entry to learning experiences online, in the library, and out in the community. And then we move on to the train step of the phase of these phases. And for the librarian, this is about attending professional development sessions and really thinking of becoming a career navigator. And we know that we know how busy your staff lives are, and we recognize that taking on one more title is not easy, but that's part of what we want feedback on here. So within these professional development sessions, you're being introduced to using things like labor market analytics to understand what skills employers in your community are looking for, really learning to serve as a career navigator for those taking the job readiness training at the library, and being somewhat of a learner support coach, helping them persist and steering them towards courses in high demand sectors. So really having that agency stay with the job seeker, making really active decisions about how job seekers are spending their time and energy in developing skills. You'll also receive tech training on the learning and employment record system, learn to issue credentials and describe those credentials using an open skills taxonomy. So getting the whole community really talking in the same skills language. For the job seeker, you're embarking on a job readiness learning pathway tailored to the needs of local employers. You get to join a cohort of learners at the library. We know that learning is social, and learning with and from your peers is often the best support. You also receive support from a career navigator to help you persist and complete the learning pathway that you've chosen in the industry that is the right fit for you. Then we move on to this idea of signaling. So the librarian is issuing a library-backed micro-credential for that job readiness learning pathway that was just completed. You also are training job seekers to understand the LER system, the technical training to accept their credentials, and really thinking about how these kind of powerful signals can be used effectively in a job search. We're going to integrate the LER system training with the library's existing programming for job seekers. So we're still developing resumes. We've still got sessions for applying for jobs online and preparing for interviews, et cetera. On the job seeker side, when you've completed your pathway, you receive training on this LER system, and you get to accept your credential, and you get to view it in your digital wallet, and you get to learn what it means to share those skills and share your information with local employers, and how you can use the skills that you've acquired and highlight them in jobs that you're applying for online. You work with a career navigator at the library to develop your resume and prepare for those interviews. Now, we're not thinking that the next step is actually always placement into a job. In fact, that feels like a bridge too far. And this is where we really want to lean into those partnerships that we heard about in Wisconsin that are so important in the community. On the librarian side, for the refer step, this is about building on and cultivating new community partnerships with the workforce board, with the local apprenticeship programs and community college and others. And this is about ensuring that job seekers that have come to the library are going to continue successfully in their job search and in getting past that first entry-level job to the better job. And for job seekers, now that, and we're really calling it, we've gone through job readiness skill training already, and we're really thinking about this job seeker now as placement ready. Maybe it's into an entry-level job and further training. But now that you're placement ready, the library career navigators are set to make that warm handoff to those community partners that have already been onboarded and introduced to the kind of skills-based approach we've been taking, and they understand how to use the micro-credential and the LAR system in job placement. Community partners will help you land a job and or connect you with next level training. So that's the happy path through through those user journeys. And now I'm going to ask, how successful were we at getting to the linked Miro board?
I was able to open it.
Okay, excellent. So I'm going to share my screen again. Okay. So as you came on, you might have looked, it might look very small like this, and I don't know how familiar folks are with Miro, but down in your right hand, lower right hand corner down here, if you roll your mouse over, you'll see that there are two plus minus icons down here for zooming in and zooming out. And if you zoom in, you can get closer and closer. Please raise your hand, or don't hesitate to interrupt me if you need a little help getting zoomed in on this. What you're going to see here is this the user journey that we just walked through. And you can zoom right up to it and see each of these steps along the journey. And you'll see it described here, so you can read a little bit for yourself. And I've pulled out some of the major features or themes. So, hey, we're introducing an LER system here. We're really making sure that there's foundational skill training available. Obviously, access to, free access to learning opportunities. And so this is essentially guiding you through some of the key areas that we've pulled out and that we're looking for some feedback on. So we're going to do this with voting dots. If you scroll to the left of the user journey, you'll see that we've got three different colors of voting dots. And you can literally, don't worry about making a mess. All of this is fine. This board is meant for you to be leaving marks on. If you click on one of these voting dots, you can pick it up and take it over to a place where you'd like to leave a comment. So a green voting dot is, I really like this idea. I'm inspired by it. A red voting dot is, I don't like it, or I don't think it'll work. A gold voting dot is a caution. This will only work if. And if you want to leave us a note, you can literally pick up a sticky here and leave it there. And we're gonna be able to take a look at how people are voting and discuss some of the things that that you leave behind. And I'll be asking for a couple of specific pieces of advice as we round up. But for right now, I'm gonna let you go at it and scroll your way through. And I'm gonna actually get rid of this because it seems to be distracting people. And we'll let you move through voting. Any questions? Anyone want to throw out a call for help? I'm going to take a look at the chat now while you're going. I see lots of people moving around, which is great. This is where I should have had music. I knew there would be the quiet working time.
I've taken to, yeah, sharing my screen and sound and playing like lo-fi or jazz whenever I have work group meetings when people are working, just because it's like similar thing when you're in a room together, everybody's silent. It works.
I know, you're like, I know, it's really great. I can see you moving around. Yes, I do. I have a colleague who does have good working playlists for all of these. We're going to do 2 more minutes of just grab dots and or leave notes and oh, I love that someone just gave us a +1 on someone else's comment. That's a really awesome way of building. The pandemic has made us all such good virtual collaborators. I know I said 2 minutes before, but I'm seeing that people are actually working their way through the user journey, so I'm not going to stop us yet. I think that some folks would can still make their way through the signal and refer areas.
And I apologize. This is so interesting, but I do have to log off. Sahara is going to keep the recording going so that
Okay.
the record. I provided some of my feedback and I can't wait to watch and see what else
Awesome.
discussed. But
Thank
you so much,
you.
Sarah.
Appreciate it. Thanks for the time.
Yep. And thank you, Sahar.
All right. So please feel free to continue to leave your voting dots and your comments as we're going. I do want to take a couple of minutes and see if I can get some actual live feedback from you all. I'm going to zero in on not the green dots, although I'm excited to look at them and read them later, but find out where there's heat, especially around cautions, which I think is awesome. And this first comment of LER virtual wallet needs buy-in from multiple agencies and providers. I could not agree with that more. And we've really at Bendable Labs and in our partnership with Burning Glass Institute have really been leaning into the idea that a community-based LER system obviously will only work if there's buy-in from key stakeholders, not just the job seekers and those supporting them, but also the credential issuing agencies. And then most importantly, the value and meaning of the credentials has to make its way all the way to the hiring manager. And I'm just curious if whoever left the dot or the note or anyone else has any thoughts on the promise or or kind of like caution around a library-based LER system, as you know, knowing that what we do need is buy-in from the whole ecosystem. Does it feel like there's good promise there, or does that feel like you know, a bridge too far? Anyone have thoughts on that? If you come off mute, I'm going to call on you. No, I'm kidding. Okay.
So part of what the LER would do would be capturing folks, or like data, right, related to how they navigate this, or no?
So sure. So the idea behind the LER system and the digital wallet that's designed specifically for entry-level job seekers. So really what we're wanting to do is have a mechanism for signaling, especially for folks who do not have a way of signaling to local employers that they have the skills that they are looking for. But in that, and part of the partnership with Burning Glass Institute, and actually we've been using Lightcast's open skill taxonomy. Part of the idea there is to be able to connect those skills with open job listings in the community at that moment, and also be able to look longitudinally at folks who have earned credentials and what jobs they are successful in, so that we're helping to build, I mean, essentially we've got a chicken and egg thing here. We have to build the value and the meaning of the credentials while making them valuable to use in order to build the value and the meaning of the credential.
Totally.
So yes, we've got.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, sure. And we're seeing the promise of the library and as a pipeline, as a really interesting use case for bringing those LERs to life. Yeah. Does anyone have any thoughts on this idea of a role of career navigator? We know that staff time is obviously a concern, and many of you may have this, you know, a similar role already emerging. I don't know if anyone has any advice there. Yep. I like the caution that digital wallets may be one more technology or app challenge for librarians to work through with their patrons. We definitely have struggled with the tension of, even with, you know, you may have come across this as well, the idea of having online courses. Obviously what we're doing there is potentially creating digital experiences, digital platforms, access to digital learning for folks who are not digitally confident. And so I think it redoubles my my thinking that the design of a digital wallet for this specific job seeking population really needs to meet their needs first and foremost, and meet the library's needs before it just becomes one more app. All right, if anyone's got any thoughts that they'd want to share about something that they really liked, and actually it was interesting to see that there are a couple of dots on labor market data, green dots. If anyone's got any thoughts about how they're using labor market data now, how to make the kind of training or professional development for librarians around access to labor market data and its analysis any easier or better. Would love to hear that. Cool. All right. Oh, great. Thank you for putting things in the chat. It's always, you always want someone checking both things. To help with the capacity and the app, it'd be very helpful to ensure there are terrific guidance, videos, tutorials, FAQs on the app, so the librarians can instead refer users to those resources, versus having to do walkthroughs. Super great point. Thank you. Okay, I know we've only got a couple minutes left of people's time, and so I want to direct you to oops. Sorry, these should have been locked. Here we go. Okay. Down below the user journeys, we've just got two areas where you can leave some comments, and I call these two areas our advice buckets. And one of them is just, if you, in thinking about a workforce library of the future and thinking about the kind of steps or that you think would be most valuable to promoting an ecosystem, a thriving workforce ecosystem that has more equitable job opportunities for your patrons. If you had a magic wand, what is the thing that you would do? Where would you make the change? Is it more staff hours? Is it better partnerships? Is it the work board doing something? Is it technology that could do, take something on? If you had a magic wand to make things better, what's something you would do? It doesn't have to be the only thing that you would do. And then the other side is, as we're thinking about, implementing this model and trying to do some demonstration projects where we're bringing all of the stakeholders together, job seekers and the folks who support them, intermediaries and community organizations, credentialing institutions or credential issuing institutions, and hiring managers. What's some advice? And I wanted to start the question or the sentence with, you'd be crazy if you didn't. So if you know something that we should know about how to make any of these kind of features really play out and take hold in the world, leave me a note in the second box. So a magic wand, you could make anything happen, or some really crucial advice to us, we'd be crazy if we didn't blank. And thank you all for those who are jumping off. I really appreciate the time and the input and the feedback. On the magic wand front, I'm giving you all the power. Leave us some thoughts. All right, any thoughts or questions? I'm going to leave the board open, and you should feel free to leave us a note. I'm also going to put my email on here one more time. And again, super happy to follow up with anyone. If you've got any thoughts or comments, please email me. Or if you have a line on folks that you think should be providing feedback, either some of your colleagues at home or in other organizations, we're taking this out and again, trying to talk to librarians, job seekers, community organizations, and hiring managers. Really appreciate your time. Thank you all. Again, I'll leave the Miro board open, but I think we can probably close. I'm going to stop screen sharing for a moment. If there's not anything else, I think we can probably close, and whoever has control over the Zoom meeting and the recording, I think we can shut it down.